Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Kent Blakeney, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about international teaching. As a trailing spouse, I have had the opportunity to work in 7 international schools, and they have been in order: Nicaragua, Morocco, Nepal, Austria, Madagascar, Senegal, Virginia, and France. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I've been hired at these different schools, what the process is like, and maybe some tips and tricks. This is going to be pretty short. I'm not sure if I'll have a question and answer session after I'm done. However, you can watch this video and feel free to send me any questions to kentblakeney@gmail.com. Let's go ahead and get started with the first part, which is comparing U.S. schools to international schools. And as I was going through, I kind of thought of 3 different adjectives that I would describe. The first one is most international schools are going to be smaller. The classrooms are going to be smaller, the number of classes are going to be smaller, and it's not going to feel like that big public school in the United States. That's not true everywhere in the world, but that is true in a lot of posts. Another adjective that would describe international schools: independence. The schools themselves are oftentimes independent. They're not part of a larger conglomerate of schools. They are not part of a school district. They're by themselves. And you as a teacher also will have a lot more independence. Now that can be both positive and negative. The third thing is culture. When I've taught in the United States, I've taught in 2 schools in North Carolina and 1 school in Virginia. One thing that kind of bonded everybody at the school, regardless of where they were from, and most of the students were Americans in both places, was the U.S. culture. So we all kind of had that as our anchor to ground us. In an international school, you don't have that. You have students from all over the world. So really, the school becomes the culture. So you have a unique school culture, which may not apply even to the families of your students. So that's a third big difference between schools in the States that I've been to and international schools. Let's move on to the next part, which is the hiring schedule. So in the United States, as most teachers at public schools, they say they're not coming back in May or June, and then there's a hiring process over the summer and you get hired and move. It's not like that in international schools. When I started off in the early 2000s, the hiring usually started around December and would go through to maybe February, maybe a little bit after that, but that was pretty much a closed little window. It's changed. In today's world, some schools give bonuses to teachers who tell them early that they're not coming back, and they do that so they can hire as early as October. So schools are hiring right now. It's just starting for the next school year. The major hiring season usually begins in December and goes through February. There's different companies that have fairs, and those fairs are around the world. Regardless of where you are in the world, there's probably a fair close to you. They generally start in Asia, move through to the Middle East, Europe, and then the US is often the last. You'll find fairs there in February. You'll see in a minute, I may not suggest that you go to a fair, but just so that you know that they're around, that's important. There's also, over the summer, there are jobs that that need to be filled. That's because people decide not to go, visa issues, whatever the problems may be, there's a little bit of a tick up in the summer. And then finally, right when school starts, you'll find that some schools, something didn't work out, a teacher came and they didn't last for whatever reason, maternity leaves, all that. So there is hiring throughout the year. All right, so once you know that you're going to a post, there's a couple things that I suggest you do. The first thing I would do is check the bilateral work agreement between the United States and whatever country your family will be going to next. Some countries have specific bilateral, well, every country has a specific bilateral work agreement because it's bilateral between the US and the other country, but some of them are different. For example, and I'm not positive about this in all cases, but Malaysia, I don't think you can work. In Thailand, you can work, but you can't come on a diplomatic visa, or you have to come on some type of special visa that you would lose your diplomatic immunity. In France, when I arrived there, it was very difficult to get a work permit, but through the time that I was there, I did get a work permit, and then they created a bilateral work agreement. So that's the first thing I would do. Check with the human resources officer or the CLO in the country that you're moving to and see if you have a bilateral work agreement. The next thing I do is email the division head, or if it's a small school, the head of school. Just introduce yourself, tell them that you're very excited that your spouse has a job with the U.S. Embassy, when you'll be there, what licenses you have, and that you would really like to be a part of the school. When I've done that, I've gotten a response 100% of the time. A lot of these heads of schools, they get tons of emails, so I usually write a subject that says like, U.S. diplomatic spouse arriving June 2023, and that will usually get their attention. Another thing I do, there's background checks are becoming more and more prevalent. So if you need to do background checks for different countries, that would be something that you could do. Last time when I worked for the American School of Paris, I had to get background checks for 5 different countries, and it wasn't very easy. It took months and months and months. So if you need to do that, now would be the time to do that. Also, check up on your teaching license, make sure that's current. When I started teaching back internationally 20 years ago, not every school would even check your license, but today I think that's pretty common, or it's definitely the standard that they will definitely want to make sure you have an active teaching license. CPR might be required, and you can also go to that school's website and see for positions that might be available this year that may not even be yours, what requirements they have. Some countries have age requirements or unique circumstances that may preclude you from working, or may actually be an asset for you. So that's another thing. Those are things that I would do before I arrived at a post. While you're waiting, so you've emailed the school, you've done everything, there's a couple resources I might look into. Go to Facebook groups and see if you can find a Facebook group for that school or the schools in the country, in the city that you're moving to. I would suggest you sign up for TIE Online, TIEonline.com. Most schools will post jobs, so you can kind of find out jobs, get an alert when a job comes up, just so that even though you've emailed the principal and they said, yeah, I'd love to see you when you get here, maybe when that job comes open that's perfect for you, you can email them again. TIE Online will give you a good idea of when jobs are posted. Let's see, what else can you do? Talk to the Office of Overseas Schools. They might have some resources for you. They're part of the Department of State. Each region has a regional director. I think that's what they call them. You could reach out and ask them about the school. I have written a couple of books on teaching internationally. If you've never taught internationally, you might want to do that. It has been called Teaching Overseas, an Insider's Perspective. I'm changing the title, and it's now called International Teaching. So if you'd like to get a copy of that, please let me know. I can send you one, or you can buy it on Amazon. And finally, this is a little bit, if you're really serious about a job, something that I have offered, and none of the schools have ever taken me up on, but you might want to even offer to fly to the post that you'll be going to next to do an interview, fly to one of the regional fairs to meet the principal or head of school, something like that. While you might think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to spend $1,500 in a week going to this school, the benefits actually could pay off quite a bit if you end up getting the job. So it's kind of one of those things you have to balance. balance out, but you'd also be able to see the post that you're moving to, see the school, meet other people, and get a better sense of the school. So that's something that you might want to ask the principal or the head of school if you feel like there's a job there that you really fit well, you might have experience with that, then maybe that's something that I would do. So the last part I want to talk to you today about is once you arrive at a school. And so once you arrive at a school, I always try to do like a little meet and greet with the head of school and the division principal. Just let them know I'm there, bring my resume, dress nicely, and just say, hey, I just want to stop by and drop this stuff off and just introduce myself now that I'm here. Usually they'll accommodate. I haven't had any problems with that. If it's right before the school starts, they're going to be super busy, so don't expect them to offer you a cup of coffee and to sit down. It's literally just putting a name with a face. You also might want to sign up for subbing. In a couple of places that I have worked, in fact, the American School of Paris and the American International School of Vienna, the way I got a teaching job was by offering to sub. So you might want to offer yourself as a sub. Usually you can get subbing jobs, and most schools I've been around are pretty desperate for subs, so that's definitely something you could do to get into a school. Another thing is, if you do have the chance to interview, it might be a little bit different than what you've had in the past. I've had interviews and I've had heads of schools who are quite skeptical of me, even when I was teaching there, because I was the spouse of somebody with the U.S. Embassy. They felt that they were doing a huge favor for me by letting me teach there, and they didn't really ever bring up the fact that I cost the school a lot less than somebody of my education from the States. For example, somebody from the States, they oftentimes will pay for housing, children's tuition, they'll pay for flights back and forth, all the medical, etc. And they don't do any of that for us. So it's kind of one of those tricky things where they always talk about how much of a benefit it is for me that I get to teach at the school, and I don't always feel that way. Some schools might offer you a local contract rather than a expat contract. I personally would probably it would really have to depend on the salary, but I don't think I'd be willing to do that. The way I look at myself is, as a dignified human being, somebody who has a PhD from the United States. I have, couple bachelor's degrees from the United States, a master's from the United States. I've taught in the United States. I'm an American. I deserve to get the expat salary. I think everybody should be on the same salary scale, but some schools give you local and an expat salary scale. So that's something I would fight for. That's something you might have to decide on your own. And benefits might be a little bit different. Some schools will offer benefits to expats, but not others. One thing you do need to keep in mind is that almost all these schools are completely independent. So regardless of what they say, most of them have leeway to adjust salaries if they want to, adjust benefits if they want to. It's essentially a contract between you and the school, not, for example, you and Fairfax County. So that's something to keep in mind. And with that, hopefully I'll have some questions and I can answer them. But I hope that gives you a good introduction to international schools. And if you want to pick up the book, it's Teaching Overseas: An Insider's Perspective is in print right now, and International Teaching is going to be offered hopefully on October 1st. Take care, and